Hi guys. So many people actually still wonder what is better for gaming, 4 gigabytes or 8 gigabytes of system memory, whatever you want to call it, RAM. I call it RAM. But actually that is maybe a pretty good idea. I do suggest everyone to go for 8 gigabytes, and well, if you can see a cheap pair of 16 gigabyte sticks, definitely get 16 gigabytes. Because gaming is really moving towards 16 gigabytes and 8 gigabytes nowadays. Depends on what games you are playing. But as you can see, I have 2 sticks of 4 gig in my system. 16 gigabytes was gonna cost me $40 more. That was a little bit too much at the time, so still is. So now I'm not going for 16 gigabytes anytime soon. Anyways, I'm gonna show you what is better, 4 gigabytes of 8 or 8 gigabytes. And I'm also gonna test the RAM speed. So I've written it down really quick with my bad scribbly hand writing. 8 gigabytes 800 megahertz and 8 gigabyte 2133 megahertz, 4 gigabytes 800 megahertz, 4 gigabytes 2133 megahertz. Just to see how much it makes a difference. If you have 1600 megahertz memory or something like that, 1600 megahertz and 2133. For gaming, it doesn't make a difference, but I just want to see the contrast of 800 megahertz and 2133 so you can see if speed really does make a difference. I want this as drastic as possible so I can actually see a good difference, because I'm gonna averaging everything out with fraps over here. I'm gonna use fraps, and I'm just gonna use my normal setting, which is this one here for 8 gigabytes 2133 on some games I have over here, and also a couple of benchmarks, whatever. So yeah, that's what we're gonna find out. So I wrote down my favorite games and a benchmark that I want to do. Cinebench, of course, that's actually a pretty decent one to test this with, I think. GTA 5, one of my favorite games. Far Cry 4, also one of my favorite games. Skyrim Special Edition, Fallout 4, and Assassin's Creed 4, which is actually my favorite Assassin's Creed and the one that actually runs the worst on my system. But it doesn't run bad, it just runs the worst. So yeah, I'm very actually curious to how this one is gonna run. But, well, we're gonna find out, right? So actually I decided to add Just Cause 3. I know this takes a lot of memory, but actually that is where games are working towards to. So actually I should include that one, because games are actually gonna use a minimum of 8 gigabytes more and more in the future, so I definitely want to add that one to our list. So here you can see my RAM, which is 8 gigabytes of DDR3, and it is 2133 megahertz. Even though it says 2132, it definitely says 2133 in the BIOS. So that's test 1, Cinebench. Keep in mind that I don't have the best CPU for rendering, okay? I did not buy this computer for any rendering or any extreme rendering, just for some YouTube videos, and that works terribly well for what I actually expected for this price for this CPU. So it is an AMD Athlon X-Core 860K quad-core, blah blah blah. It says 2 cores, 4 threads. That's a bit weird because it is definitely a quad-core and it definitely has 4 threads, no hyper-threading enabled because it has no hyper-threading. 64-bit, yeah, that's true. And a GTX 960, yes indeed, I got that for a pretty nice price. And keep in mind, I live in the Netherlands, so that's a pretty nice price. Is actually, for you Americans out there with Craigslist, pretty expensive, but whatever. Let's just run CPU test. You can see it's going, and to keep everything as cool as possible, because I have an open case with no airflow, I added a very loud fan over there. If you hear it, I'm very sorry, but it's just there to keep everything fair, because heat issues do have a very big impact on performance, and that would screw up all my tests if I do not connect that fan. So I'm sorry, but I just have to connect it. I won't bother you too much with it though. Waiting for this to just finish up real quick. Oh, it's almost done. It is done already, but let me just tell you, this case, I know it looks terrible, it is ugly, and it is very noisy and blah. Why do I still have this? Well, I'm saving up for the best case that I could ever buy for this. and much more I'm not willing to spend. So yeah, I won't say what it is, but I am looking for a tempered glass, a little bit tinted, but not too much, side panel. If you can guess which one it is, you deserve a like from Santa. Yeah, you deserve a like from Santa. But back to the tests. You can see this is terrible. This is not made for rendering, of course not. But it works totally fine for gaming. So yeah, and I will just write this down really quick. 313 Cinebench score thing, whatever that means. Not that great, but good. So I will just show you my settings of Skyrim Special Edition, which is the one I'm going to begin with. So Ultra, okay, and turn off anti-aliasing. I don't like that at all, actually. Turn it up to 1440 by 900. That is the resolution of my screen. I know it's not the highest resolution. It's not even 1080p. But it's not about that. It's about the difference in FPS and not about how much FPS. So, okay, and play. Let's see. Okay, so here I am. I think I'm just gonna play for 5 minutes. That should be enough for Skyrim. Otherwise, I'm, well, pretty much wasting quite a lot of time. So, yeah, I'm just gonna do 5 minutes. That's gonna be fine. Right, so the benchmark finished, and let's see what the results are. Right, Far Cry 4 is next up. Let me just turn on my fan and my computer real quick. Right, Far Cry 4 is next up. It's a Ubisoft game. So as you can see, glitches are already to be seen. But let's just see what the FPS is gonna be. So I'm also gonna play this for 5 minutes and see what happens. This is a really fun game, by the way. I absolutely love this game. Yeah, let's just see what happens with the FPS and stuff. So as you can see, I'm loading the benchmark tests. That is just to save time, and that is, yeah, that's totally fine actually. So as you can see, yeah, this is actually a bit lower than normal, and a bit higher than normal at certain times, but it is totally fine. Good enough. It saves a lot of time. While this is going, I will just tell you really quick. Of course, I am filming my screen, as you can see, and you can see everything around it. It's not really well cleaned up, I'm very sorry. But it's about the screen and what's on there. Why do I do this? Obviously, because I cannot record my screen with a screen recorder when I have 4 gigabytes of RAM. And, well, doing that with 8 gigabytes of RAM will not make it very fair. So, yeah, I know, it's a little bit crappy like this, but I'm also filming stuff like this. As you can see, I have a little bit of a mark so I can keep up with what I've done already, the scores, so I can just really quick so I can switch really quick. So next up we have Assassin's Creed 4, one of my favorite Assassin's Creeds I have. But I actually like them all, the ones I have. But anyways, let's just benchmark this for 5 minutes or so, and let's see what the results are. Alright, so as you can see, I've put all the numbers down into an Excel sheet, as you can see over here. So I have Cinebench, GTA 5, and then the min, max, average, everything like this. Pretty well laid out. I think it's a lot of information like this. So as you can see, I did some tests with the 800 megahertz and the 2133 and the 800 2133. So actually I have 2133 megahertz RAM, so that's why I am not running it at 1600, but RAM of 1600 megahertz and above is more than enough. And also 1600 megahertz at the least is actually recommended for you, because you will see why. As you can see, Cinebench scored pretty poorly here overall. Scored very poor here. It scored well, yeah, 1 point less, but that's pretty much the same, I would say. This one was actually kind of interesting. So the RAM as well as the speed really makes a very big difference on rendering. So that's interesting, but to be expected, I guess, obviously. As you can see, this was very bad. We had a minimum of 7 FPS here, and The maximum was actually with a loading screen for a lot of games. So as you can see, a loading screen maximum here 600. That's pretty bad. This one, a loading screen. So actually, I've made a graph, as you can see, which is here. And actually, I think I gotta remove the maxes really quick. So if you, I know this is in Dutch, so if you don't understand anything, that's why. So I think it says min, average, min, average, min, average, min, average, min, average. There we go. So Cinebench is of course not in FPS, but in Cinebench Core. But the rest is actually in FPS. So I've changed this to steps of 10. So as you can see, this is pretty alright. So I know this is not very easy to read. Maybe I should, but this is in steps of 10, so you can just pretty much make out the numbers over here. So what is very interesting to see is that the difference between 4 gigabytes, 2133 and 800 megahertz, which is this one is the 2133 megahertz, this one is the 800 megahertz. Both are 4 gigabytes, and this is the 8 gigs. It was pretty much as expected, except for this one here, GTA 5. Let's say that one. The speed of your RAM really does matter, so you should get the fastest you could get for your money. So at least 1600, and if you get for like $10 more, you can get 2400 megahertz. You should totally do that, because for rendering it makes a very big difference, but for gaming, yeah, you do actually notice a difference. Even though 1600 megahertz is more than enough, RAM, you just want it as fast as possible, but just don't do it if it is like 20-30 bucks more, because that is just not worth the difference. So that's why I got 2133 megahertz, because it was $10 more. And actually I couldn't find any confirmed working 1600 megahertz 8 gigabytes anymore in my country, so that's why I went for this. Just Cause 3 is where it really showed that 4 gigabytes was not able to run it at all. The minimum was 0 FPS for both 4 gigabytes, 800 megahertz as well as 2133 megahertz, and the average just on medium settings, alright, around the 7 to 3 FPS. And it is really weird that this one scored better than that one. It just shows that 4 gigabytes is just incapable of doing it. 8 gigabytes, however, made a huge jump with the 800 megahertz, and that wasn't really playable at all. But going to the 8 gigabytes 2133 megahertz, it was very poorly scoring actually, as you can see, not very high, like 40 FPS, which is, but most of the time it was actually very playable. It was actually, for my feeling, it was actually most of the time 40 to 50 to 60 FPS, which is not very high, but you could turn some settings down. But it was way more playable than this one. This one was stuttering all over the place. All these three. These three was stuttering all over the place. Skyrim was pretty painful actually, because this one, very poor for Skyrim. This one is very poorly scoring. This one, much better. An average of 74, 73 FPS. That is totally fine. Plays really nice actually. Far Cry 4 has a really nice average of 90 FPS on my main rig, and it is actually pretty playable on this on 4 gigabytes as well, as long as you get 1600 megahertz, as I said. Very playable actually, but not that great compared to 8 gigabytes. Just look at the difference. I mean, I will get a 70 FPS here and 90 FPS here. That means I upgrade my CPU and I could turn some settings up a lot actually, but with the 4 gigabytes I will just be limited. Same story actually for GTA 5. That was actually really painful to watch for this one, because this one, even though it got an average of 56 FPS on the 4 gigabytes 800 megahertz, it was stuttering all over the place. It was not rendering certain things, but it was not crashing. 4 gigabytes 2133, it was a bit better. Still not that great, but I'm guessing that's to be expected. So yeah, just as you can see, Assassin's Creed, just a small note on that, everything stuttered as freaking hell except for the 8 gigabytes 2133 megahertz. Everything stuttered except for that one. It was these two with 4 gigabytes, it was completely unplayable. On the lowest settings, it was completely unplayable. So this one was very badly optimized for rigs like mine, this Assassin's Creed game. Very sad actually. So yeah, should you get 8 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes, just get 8 gigabytes and get 1600 megahertz, and if you get it for 10-20 bucks more, 2133 or 2400 megahertz, you should totally do that. I 100% recommend you doing that because it just makes a world of difference if you ever, like, I have a pretty average CPU, but if I were to upgrade my CPU to something better and I can use the same RAM, I just click it in there and I'm done. It's gonna give me some more performance than this, just a lot more performance than this, and the 4 gigabytes would just stop right there where it is now. Maybe a bit better because of the better CPU, but it would just pretty much stop right here and it wouldn't get much better because 4 gigabytes is just really limiting in today's world of gaming. And if you are rendering things in, like, say, Blender or whatever, why did you click on this video? You should get 16 gigabytes or maybe even 32 gigabytes because rendering, if you want to do it good, you should get something like 16 gigabytes or more, like if you really want to render. 8 gigabytes is nice to start with, but if you really want to render, you should get 16 gigabytes or more. Anyways, I hope you liked this video. I hope it helped you out. I know it is a lot of data and stuff in here, but it really does show that speed makes a bigger difference than how many gigabytes you have, unless you get something like 1600 megahertz or more, which most people do, and then you should really go for 8 gigabytes, I think, because of games like Just Cause 3. I think a lot of games do really depend on 8 gigabytes or more these days, like Battlefield 1 and the new Call of Duties that are gonna come out are probably also gonna recommend sometime a minimum of 8 gigabytes, and that is not very far from this time. Thanks for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.